Well, concerns about a double-dip recession have prompted many to say the government budget tightening is the key to keeping the recovery on track. Our next guest says quite the opposite. David Blanchflower is a former member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, and he says we should let history be our guide. He's now an economics professor at Dartmouth, and he also is a contributing columnist here at Bloomberg. He's joining us now from Hanover, New Hampshire. So thank you so much for joining us. You know, this has been really the big debate, hasn't it, between stimulus and austerity. The U.S. kind of on one side and Europe on another. And it seems like you're on the U.S. side of the equation. You think stimulus is the answer here?
Well, I think you just have to worry about the possibilities of making an error. If you think about, if you keep stimulus going for too long, well, what's the worry about that? Not that much. But if you take it away too quickly, the error would be that you would see the economy slowing, double dip at best. Paul Krugman's talked about what he calls the long depression, which is actually something worse than a double dip, because people think of a double dip as a W, which means a really fast upward sloping part. But that might not come about. We might actually see a long decade of very, very low growth and no real recovery. So the worry is that much of what we see is driven by the stimulus. You take the stimulus off, that makes things worse. So that's the worry, and history is our teacher in this, and there are lessons from history that look like that.
Well, I have to ask, though, I mean, when you talk about a decade or so of low growth, I mean, right now we've got GDP growing, albeit at a relatively slow rate. You have economists forecasting that we'll continue to see this low rate, 3% or so, give or take, here in the U.S. I mean, is that so terrible if you just do not pick neither choice, neither stimulus nor cutting?
Well, if you read the IMF's report this week, they're starting to talk about this perhaps being the peak. I mean, the worry is that this has been driven by this huge stimulus, low interest rates, big fiscal stimulus going. The US, in a sense, can't drive the world. There is contagion around the world. The US has been doing okay, but it's early days. China looks like it's slowing. The European area is slowing, and Germany really should be trying to boost that area, and it's doing the opposite. The UK is making big fiscal cuts, and it looks that the growth is pretty fragile. So it's not that you don't have to do these things. It's really about timing. It's really about growth being strongly established. And it looks very much to me that growth's anemic. And the US administration think the same here. And the worry is the US, if you like, can't drive the world.
Well, what about the concern that the higher deficits are going to eventually hurt consumer confidence, which is already very low, and that then is going to help keep perpetuating what's going on with the economy?
Well, I mean, one of the big things that's going on at the moment is that unemployment is scaring people. I wrote a column last week about the fact that consumer confidence in the US, particularly expectations, took a big hit down. In the UK, they've taken a big hit down. It's clear that unemployment hurts people. The worry is if you start to impose these austerity measures, that makes matters worse when growth is not firmly established. The question is, are firms intending to hire and invest around the world? And the evidence I see, I'm a Labour economist, I don't see strong evidence of the private sector stepping into the fold. So we've got to just keep going. And then finally, governments are actually borrowing money at incredibly low long-run rates of interest. There is not a crisis in the bond markets for many countries. You can borrow money for 40 years at very low nominal rates. I don't see that as really a crisis. At this point, the only crisis is being created by those who say, oh, there's a crisis.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we don't have any time left. We could continue this debate for quite a while, and we'll have you back on to do so as we get some more economic data out. Thanks a lot. David Blanchflower joining us from New Hampshire this